We've got the communication sorted out.
7:04.
We're ready to go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the ordinary council meeting, 3rd of March 2020, here in Mount Beauty. Can I remind everyone to turn off their mobile phone or turn them to silent, if you will, please. Thank you. I'll hand over to the CEO to start the show.
Item 1, recording of council meetings. All council meetings are filmed with both video and audio being recorded. Video is focused on a specific area, however audio from the entire room is captured. By speaking during question time or at any time during the meeting, you consent to your voice and any comments you make being recorded. In common law narrative during council meetings, verbal responses to congratulations, obituaries and question time will not be recorded in the written minutes. The reasoning behind recording council meetings is of course to hold us more accountable and improve transparency of council decision making to our community. The full meeting is being recorded and a copy will be uploaded to council's YouTube channel, which is Alpine Shire Council, and will be available tomorrow morning after this meeting.
Acknowledging of traditional custodians and recognition of all people, please stand.
The Alpine Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we're now on. We also acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community and strive to make wise decisions and improve the quality of life for all.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Ordinary council meeting M1 held on the 4th of February 2020. Ms Cook, the minutes from that meeting are to be found near the front door?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone's interested in reading the minutes, near the front door. The recommendation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting, council meeting M1 held on the 4th of February 2020 as circulated be confirmed. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Pearce. Any comment? No. All those in favour?
Yeah.
Carried. Apologies, Councillor Janice. We wish him well. He's attending to a death in family, so we hope to see him again soon. Obituaries and congratulations. From my left, Councillor Pearce.
I've got congratulations tonight to the Gapstead CFA. I was at their CFA Water Games, if you wish to call it that, on Sunday. Fantastic effort, and it was really pleasing to see the number of young people that are now joining CFA. They even had under 13 teams competing on that day, so it was a very, very good job.
Nothing for me.
Councillor Napstone.
Is that on? Okay. Just going to mention Hannah Clark and her 3 children on February the 19th in relation to family alarms. Never an excuse.
Councillor Keeble.
I just want to note the sad passing on the weekend from Derek Melissa. Thoughts go out to the Ranton family, the school community and his band community as well. Very sad.
I concur. I mean, realistically, it's a tragic thing to happen in a small town. Everyone knows and everyone's grieving, and I wish it hadn't happened, and I think that's about as far as we can go. Declarations by councillors of a conflict of interest, of which we have none. Question time. I have one question on notice, which comes from the Bright Chamber. Is Bruce here? At the back. Each councillor, this is from the Bright District Chamber of Commerce, Secretary Bruce Hall. Each councillor within the rural city of Wangaratta have their own portfolios such as health, youth, business, sport, etc. So do the councillors within the Alpine Shire have similar portfolios? If so, which councillor is responsible for economic activity and engaging with business stakeholders? If not, will council consider implementing such a system? Okay. We've tried portfolios in the past, and being such a small council, when there was an issue that needed to be dealt with, a portfolio worked well, but mostly we're all across what's going on around the council. The council telephone numbers and email addresses are easily found on the council website. We currently don't have art designated councillors for responsible activity and engaging with business stakeholders, but no doubt you will be in contact with councillors to invite us to activities that you may be considering in the future. I hope that answers your question. So there's no other formal questions on notice. We'll go to public questions. And I have a statement at the start of this, but I will not be taking any questions from Ray Dyer. Mr. Dyer in the past has used question time, in my opinion, to be disruptive and disrespectful, and I am unsure what his mandate actually is, so I will not be taking any questions from Mr. Dyer. I hope you understand that, Mr. Dyer.
No, Mr. Mayor, where's my democratic right?
Mr. Dyer,
No, Mr. Mayor, I have my democratic right.
Could you leave, Mr. Dyer?
No, I'm sorry, we'll talk about it.
I'm not going to talk about it at all. Any further questions
because
from
there's a
the
few
floor,
things got to be
please?
sorted out.
Any further questions from the floor? At the back, could you come to the microphone and state your name, please? Mr. Dyer, if you're not going to be quiet, please leave.
Mr. Mayor, that's what it is.
My name is Barbara Talbot, and tonight I'm representing the Toowoomba and District Community Association. Just about signage on the Keel Valley Highway for our Pioneer Park, our barbecue area, our clean toilets, our children's playing area, and the newest area down there in the Pioneer Park, the Memorial. We have written to the Vic Roads asking for signage. We've had no answer at all. We wondered if Shire could follow up on that for us.
Mr. Jeremy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Barbara, I'm happy to take that one up, and we'll contact Vic Roads and I'll get back in touch with you.
Thank you.
Yes. Jim?
More a statement than not a question. We've had a bushfire problem in Mount Beauty. The danger for us is an ember attack or radiant heat close by us that'll set us on fire. And the biggest problem, of course, is everyone is asked to leave, and so all the houses are unprotected. Without the houses being able to protect themselves, in other words, cleaned up.
This is a question part.
Yeah, well, this is a statement.
Yep.
I'll ask a question at the end. At present, if you feel endangered by a neighbour or near neighbour's lack of cleaning up, you have to dob them in. Now, the repercussions for me of dobbing my neighbour in have been horrendous. I don't think that the town should rely on someone dobbing in everyone that hasn't done a clean-up. I'm advocating that the Shire appoint someone to inspect not only rural properties, but suburban properties, so that your next door neighbour has to clean up and you don't have to dob them in.
So your question, Jim, if I may paraphrase it,
Yes?
is that you are asking council to appoint an officer to check suburban properties as well as rural properties.
Exactly.
Would you like to answer that?
Thank you for the opportunity.
What was it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a small comment and then I'm happy to follow up. So my understanding is there's no need to be seen to be dobbing your neighbour, and any member of the public can provide what would be essentially a confidential request to council. You could contact council and ask them to look into a specific property, and our fire inspection officers would be happy to do that. So I don't understand the specific circumstance of why you believe you had to dob your neighbour in, but certainly we can receive a phone call where you're happy to keep that confidential, and we'll send someone out to do what's essentially an independent inspection of the risk presented by that property.
Sorry, I don't agree with that being a good method. The police often have to go to someone and asked them to turn the radio down because their neighbour's ringing up about it. But the neighbour hasn't gone to him and asked him to turn it down. They've gone round and the repercussions are still crook. The bloke that's got the stereo knows his neighbour's dobbed him in. But unless people are aware that their neighbour's leaving their place in jeopardy, they don't do anything about it. And they're not the ones to judge whether the houses are in a state of readiness for an Ember attack. And so the system is not, I'm not wording this too well at all.
Can I offer a way forward, Jim? Why don't you, we can't give you a definitive answer about what will happen in the future currently. You've given us some guidance on what you'd like to see happen, and I think that's where we're probably at this point in time. So there's enough time between now and the next fire season to actually think about that process, and we'll try and implement your suggestion.
But I can assure you that it's been very unpleasant. And the fire officer agreed with me and had the property cleaned up.
I understand what you're saying, Jim. It is very difficult living in a small community, and issues like this can be divisive.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further questions from the floor? Bruce.
Bruce Law, Secretary of the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to follow up my earlier question with a question on notice. The current economic plan was written in 2010. Would the Council please provide us information on when this plan is expected to be revised, and what would the process be for actually engaging with business and activities and understanding what the plan for the Shire will be economically in the next 20 years?
Right. So 20-year plans are always difficult to do, Bruce, as you well imagine, but we had in plans to do an economic strategy at some point, but we've had a January that's been a little bit difficult and a little more difficult than we had imagined. I'd imagine the process going forward, we had hoped to have this done before Council goes into caretaker mode. Hopefully that's still a possibility, but I'm not quite sure.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just add
Yep.
some more detail to that. So a really good question. So we have an allocation this year's budget to develop a new economic development strategy, and the steps for that, we're currently doing some data analysis at the moment, and it has been, as Mayor Roper has alluded to, with January hasn't been ideal and has put us back somewhat, but we're back into it, which is great. We'll be undertaking a visioning exercise following on from that, which I believe will be in April. April, May, we'll commence that with the community about what the community would like the Alpine Shire to look like in 30, 50 years' time. And that'll be a really important exercise which will inform a number of strategies, one of which will be the economic development strategy. And following on from there, the steps will be to develop the economic development strategy in consultation with key stakeholders, which includes the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce. The challenge we face this year is that it's an election year, and there's a caretaker period, and prior to that as well, there's also a period which Council has to be careful about what decisions it makes as well leading up to that election. So that's just something we need to be mindful of, and so we may not be able to complete the economic development strategy before the Council election because of that constraint. But that's ideally that's what we will do, and as we work through it, we'll keep you informed about how the timeline is.
Okay, so my second question, if I may, is what is the part that the Council's play in the development of the economic plan versus the bureaucracy?
So
It's a whole community. Yeah. That's a Dorothy Dixon, Bruce. It's a whole community plan. And it's not just about business, it's about the community as well too. And we've got Dinner Plain, we've got Mount Beauty, and we've got Myrtleford to consider apart from Brighton, plus Harrogate, and plus the communities that live in those communities. Excuse me, Bruce?
With respect, may I ask you a point like that?
I'm just asking
a straightforward question. What is the role of the councillors in the development of the economic part of the town plan versus the bureaucracy?
That's a strategic direction and consultation with the community. and facilitation.
Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, Mr. Dyer, there's no
All
questions
the
from you.
minutes aren't in this paper. They're not all there. All the minutes.
They're still on the
Now,
bench, Mr.
you're
Dyer.
saying that I cannot talk anymore. You're going to put that in writing?
Until you change your attitude, Mr. Dyer,
No,
I
I
won't
would
be
like
taking
it
any
in
more
writing,
questions from you.
Mr. Mayor.
No more.
I have
Is there any more questions
back
from the
next
floor,
council
please?
meeting otherwise. In writing, please. I have every right. No dictatorship around here.
Goodbye, Mr. Dyer. Any more questions from the floor?
But I don't like the leadership here. Well and truly.
You haven't liked the leadership for the last 10 years. Any more questions from the floor? If there's not, we will move on to the general body of the report. Presentation of report by officers. 8.1, Chief Executive Officer Charlie Byrne.
This item relates to the award of contracts approved and CEO delegations relates to contracts awarded for the Carnage Crush Rock for the annual gravel reaching program. It's recommended that the contracts approved by the CEO be noted.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Pearce. Any questions? No? All those in favour? Carried. 8.2, Director of Assets, William Jeremy. 8.2.1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the award of a contract for the project management and the preparation of detailed concept designs for the Harriettville and for the Toowoomba townships. People familiar with the work we did in Orpunka, Myrtleford and the Centre of Pride, that was under the Alpine Better Places. So Mount Beauty was done under Progressing Places, which was a similar project, but a similar scope but a different project. So what these projects seek to address was to improve the streetscapes, covering wayfinding signage, paths, tracks and trails to better connect the town's assets and the facilities, integrate landscape treatments and improve parking options, improve open space reserves, including upgraded and additional facilities. So essentially what we're proposing here is an award of a contract that gets us on the same journey for Harriettville and Toowoomba, and this is in response to feedback from those communities that they'd like to see us putting some focus on those two particular townships.
Second.
Councillor Pearce, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Keeble, sorry.
Did we announce the actual...
Use my microphone.
We need to make that announcement.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. I'll read out. So the recommendation is that Council awards the contract 1909801 for project management and design services for Alpine Better Places, Harriettville and Toowoomba to MDG Landscape Architects for a lump sum price of $147,700. I'll just point out to the council and to the audience as well that it's the same architect who carried out the detailed concept designs for the Alpine Better Places for Montgomery, Myrtleford and Bright as well. So we're pleased to have the same consultant back on board with us. We think we're going to get an excellent outcome from that.
Councillor Keeble.
Thanks. Sorry, we put back in there too early. Just a quick question on this one. It's fantastic to see us doing this project in some of our smaller towns for the gallery and the people on the World Wide Web there. Community consultation at this stage?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So it's a key part of the process, and it's one of the earliest parts of this process will be to start getting some engagement with the community around what kind of scope, so the extent of the area that we look at, and also what are the things of importance to the two communities as we work through this scope. So yeah, we can expect within the coming months to be hearing from the consultants as we start to essentially shape the plans. And there'll be a number of touch points, as we did with the Alpine Better Places in the other valley. There'll be a number of touch points with the community. So we'll hear what you would like to see, we'll plan it out, and then we'll come back to you again to show you, essentially what we think we've heard, and just to sense check that we've got the right message from the community. So there'll be a number of points where the community will get the opportunity to input into these plans.
Councillor Nicholas.
Echo Councillor Keeble's comments about it being great to see an extension of the facelifts and improvements for connectivity, etc., to smaller towns and particularly into the beautiful Kiwi Valley. It's one of my favourite places. And just to follow up too, part of the project brief is to include consultation with communities. So people who we're looking at awarding a contract to have experience working with our Alpine Shire communities, so that's great.
Any further comments? If not, we'll go to the vote. Councillor Pearce. On the death knot.
Hello. Sorry, Mr Mayor and my colleagues, I'm not annoying you with this same one I've been mentioning a little bit, but it seems an appropriate time. I appreciate what's on the table there now, but I just thought there was something missing, and that's the school bridge at Harrickville. It's next to a hotel motel, it's foggy, there's a lot of ski traffic go through, and I realise it comes under Vic Roads, but it could be added on to this proposal. Thank you.
Terrific segue, Councillor Pearce. All those in favour?
What I just said, was that all? No.
8.2.2, Mr Jeremy.
So the purpose of this report is to present to Council the 2020 review of the Alpine Shire Council's Sealing of Gravel Roads Policy 38 and seek Council's adoption of the revised and renamed policy, Alpine Shire Council Sealing of Unsealed Roads Policy. So the background to this, we have an internal policy at the moment which is called the Sealing of Gravel Road Policy. We get very many requests from members of the community to seal unsealed roads. And at the moment, because we have an internal policy, we don't have an easy means of essentially sharing with the community the process we follow to assess the priority for sealing unsealed roads. So essentially the key change we're proposing here is to change this from an internal facing policy, which is applicable just to our staff, to a policy we were able to share openly with the community. So when we receive a request to have one of our unsealed roads sealed, we essentially have a mechanism so we can share with the community this is the process that we step through. The other small tweak here is we have a road dust suppression policy which is being proposed for being revoked at the same time, because the content of the dust suppression policy, the old dust suppression policy had a very significant overlap with the road sealing policy. So you can imagine one of the best mechanisms for suppressing dust is to actually seal a road. So there's a very significant overlap between those two policies, and subsequently we've pulled them together into a single policy. So the recommendation this evening is the Council revokes the current Sealing of Gravel Roads Policy number 38, which was approved in 2006, and revokes the Road Dust Suppression Policy number 81, which was approved in 2010, adopts the Alpine Shire Council Sealing of Unsealed Roads Policy version 3, and signs and seals this policy at the appropriate point of the meeting.
Councillor Keeble, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Will. This document will add to the asset management and also just to community information as it comes out and available. People will know that we have a pipeline of projects, so this will also help with that narrative. So if you on a unsealed road, I would imagine this would be a good policy to have a look at. It will be available now where it wasn't before.
Councillor Nicholas.
The addition of an externally facing policy for these matters is also, I think, will facilitate people who want to get a road sealed to understand why not. And I just wanted to point out that the Alpine Shire Council, along with all other councils, provide well over 70 services across the community. So the ones that we can make more efficient, it's really good. I think I said that very well.
Any further comments? Councillor Mason.
Just a brief one because it's one of the questions that comes up time and again, whichever the locality you're in. People can point out to roads that they say, why isn't that being sealed? And if they understand the reasoning behind it and how it's prioritised, it takes a lot off. Thank you.
Any further comments? If not, to the vote. All those in favour? So,
Just a quick one there. Is the road sealing funded purely by the Shire or by Big Roads? Or is it a combination?
depends. Councillor. Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're actually sealing a few roads this year, and it's the first time in a long time that we've sealed any roads in the Alpine Shire. The reason we've been able to seal those roads is because we've secured external funding through the Fixing Country Roads programme. So typically we wouldn't include sealing of unsealed roads in our annual programme unless we had access to funding to allow us to do that.
Answer your question, Barbara?
Yeah.
It's good. Back to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3, Director of Corporate, Natalie Cook. 8.3.1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report provides the second quarterly report for 2019-20 against the Alpine Shire Council Plan 2017 to 2021. Highlights in this report are shown for October to December 2019. The bushfires that affected a large part of the Shire during January 2020 will be reported as part of the Q3 reporting, which will be due to be reported to Council in May. Just to draw out a couple of highlights from the report that's in your papers. The Business System Transformation Project is a joint project with Indigo Shire Council and Towon Shire Council. The contract for the preferred systems vendor was awarded by all three councils in December, allowing implementation of this project to commence.
Mover and seconder, please. I move. So Councillor Keeble, Councillor Forsyth. She's busy tonight, don't
It's great to get the quarterly report. I wanted to take, just highlight some of the areas. Well, one of the things I wanted to highlight was the Mount Beauty Skate Park upgrade, which has commenced. I want to say hands up who's got a skateboard, but it's terrific one. So it'll be terrific for the people of our community to be able to exercise and hang out and socialise in that space.
I think you better ask who owns a pair of skis or a push bike and one of them a few more hands.
Yes, skis and push bike. I will say that the committee for the skate park there started this process, I think 3 years ago, where they did some fundraising, and they've been really strong. I don't know if anyone's in the room from that committee tonight, but their drive and their questions have seen it to where it is today, so I'd like to congratulate them as well.
Councillor Forsyth? I think the skate club raised $15,000, which I think is important. Yeah.
I'd just like to note that it's not actually a reporting requirement to give this, but these quarterly reports actually, not only do they give councillors a fair idea of what the organisation's doing, it also gives the general public a fair idea as well. So I think it's very good.
No further questions? Councillor Napster.
I do have one question. The Gillett Cherry Park Skate Facility on the Surf Coast Shire, they had built their skate bowl. I don't know how deep this one is, but what they found out afterwards when somebody had a serious injury was that there was no access for ambulance services to go into there. Do we have that?
Can I speak from experience with you? I've actually put my push bike into one of those skate park bowls, and I had to throw the push bike out, and I had to take a running jump and grab the top and scramble out, and luckily it was up past 6 in the morning and no one saw me. But no, they're hard to get into. I will agree.
So how do we solve that problem if there's a serious injury and...
I'd imagine a ladder.
Backboard ropes.
Okay.
Yep.
It was just a problem that they found after the completion of it.
You raise a good point. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.2, Public Memorials, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's revocation of its place, road and memorial naming policy number 57 and adoption of a new public memorials policy being number 113. Council's place, road and memorial naming policy number 57 was adopted in December 2005. The place and road naming are now comprehensively addressed within legislation, so we no longer need a policy to deal with those issues. However, it is proposed that we can we retain a policy for public memorials, which only addresses memorialisation of those people who are going to be done so through the memorial plaque. I'm very sorry, that was very inarticulate. I will try a little bit harder the rest of the report. The proposed public memorials policy only addresses requests for memorialisation via memorial park. Council typically receives less than 10 of these requests per year. Other potential types of memorialisation are open to individuals and to groups, and these could take the form of the erection of a public statue, a bursary, or any other form of memorialisation that may be wished by the community. Those sorts of memorialisation will not be addressed through this policy. The review has been undertaken of this policy and a draft has been put out for public consultation. Only one submission was received on this public consultation, and those comments have been incorporated back into the draft policy. It is recommended that the policy is adopted.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Epstein. Councillor Nicholas.
I think that it's really important that we have clear policies, particularly outward-facing policies, so people can understand what they need to do to achieve what they want to achieve, and this is one.
Councillor Epstein.
I like the idea of other meaningful ways of memorialising somebody that gives back to the community then as well.
Correct. Any further questions? No? Councillor Pearce.
Look, I think there's circumstances when someone may deserve, and that's covered in this note here. But we are memorised at the cemetery from plaques that we place on our sites.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. No further comment. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.3, Ms Cook. Permit registration fee relief for Alpine Shire residents and businesses.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to recommend that Council approves fee relief for residents and businesses in the Shire who have been affected during the current 2019 financial year by the recent bushfires. Alpine Shire Council has received funding from the Victorian Government's Council Assistance Fund. These funds have been made available to 6 local government areas in the declared state of disaster area, and the intention of the funding is to assist people who have damaged or destroyed property, as well as businesses that have been indirectly affected by the fire. It is recommended that Council adopts a fee of $0 for registrations and permit applications under the various acts as detailed in the report recommendations for this financial year. Also, that Council approves a refund of any fees already paid under these acts in the financial year, and approves the payment of building and planning fees by Council on behalf of the applicants for rebuilding those assets directly impacted by the bushfires for applications made prior to the 30th of June 2021. The proposed fee relief includes the following components, which has been detailed through the report and totals a financial implication of $179,645, and will require an administrative staff member to spend some period of time to process this through. The intention of this relief is to propose reliefs to businesses who have been indirectly impacted by the fires.
A mover and seconder, please. Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pardon me. The estimated value of fee relief, just looking at that last line item there, Ms Cook, the Building Act 1993 fees for directly impacted assets. Is that just houses, or is it also fence lines and or sheds?
It would be that rebuilding requires a building permit, so it depends on the zoning and what the actual building permit would be. Generally not fences, however it would be sheds, particularly depending on the zoning and what was required in the building permits.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Councillor Nicholas.
Support from the state government's always welcome. Obviously we can't, they didn't give us enough money to give rate relief to absolutely everybody.
Registration fees.
Oh, I'm sorry, maybe on to the next one. Sorry, I've jumped ahead.
Any further questions?
I still second.
Before we go to the vote, is there anyone from the floor that's uncertain about what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, but fee relief, does that include, I believe, the fairly hefty fee for the redevelopment of the club facilities between that duty? Would that include that?
So what we're looking at is fees under the, no, I don't believe so, but I'm not really sure what that fee was. So if it was a redevelopment fee in terms of a planning or a building fee, unless your property was actually impacted, i.e. it was burnt by fire and you're required to have another apply for those fees to rebuild, then it wouldn't. But if you're a business who has a permit for an A-frame or a permit for on-street dining or on-street trading or one of those permits under our local laws or the various acts, to enable you to trade on council land, then we would be refunding the fee for this financial year.
So does that include revenue as well, or just physical loss of buildings?
For under those other acts, that would be for all businesses who have those fees under those acts. So there are a few different things in this report. So what we have is we have a zero fee for this financial year for the permits that people might have applied for their businesses. So things like those A-frames.
Could Mr. Jeremy roll back to the estimated value of fee relief, because it spells out what the fees are there?
The building.
There you go.
So the building and planning fees are slightly different. That is for properties who have been burnt, but for businesses or for properties that have required to apply for a permit from council, we will be refunding those fees under this recommendation.
So I think if anyone's still uncertain what this means, the council officer here at the end of the meeting, you can talk to the council officer and I'll explain further. But the main items are laid out here, which is the permits and registrations that businesses have to apply for on a yearly basis for arguments. So it could be an A-frame on the street, or it could be on-street dining, etc., etc., etc.
If a business has not yet made an application, then we would be waiving those fees, but we require the businesses to still apply because we require them to have the right permits in place. So we are not proposing a waiver of the requirement for the permit, we are proposing a waiver of the fee associated with that permit. So we will ask businesses to still apply for the permits they require to run their business, and then we will look at waiving the fee. If a business has already got the permit in place and paid a fee, then we are proposing to make a refund of that fee.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. I think we're ready for the vote, unless there's a question, unless we've really confused everyone, but I just think it might be the best thing to do to ask Ms. Cook later on. All those in favour? Carried. Item 8.3.4, rate relief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, this report relates to rate relief relating to the January 2020 bushfires. So the purpose of this report is to recommend that council approves rate relief for properties that were burnt or businesses that were affected during the bushfires in the current bushfire season. Alpine Shire Council again has received funding from the Victorian Government's Council Assistance Fund, which allows us to put this recommendation forward to you. What we are proposing is that for those businesses that are rated commercial or industrial under our differential rating policy, 1/4 of the rates that were levied for the 1920 financial year would be waived, as would 1/4 of those rates for the Dinner Plain special rate and for the farming differential rate, non-vacant only, for those businesses or wineries or vineyards. Aside from that, we are also proposing that for those properties that were burnt during the current bushfire season, that the rates that were levied for the full financial year be waived for that application. So that's a full financial year waiver for those properties that were actually burnt during the fire season. For those businesses that were impacted who pay commercial or industrial rates, as 1/4 of the rates for the financial year we're proposing to waive. For businesses that are operating in the Shire who do not pay commercial industrial rates and believe that they were impacted by this fire season, we are also proposing that an application process be put in place whereby those businesses can apply to also have consideration for a waiver of 1/4 of their yearly instalment of rates.
Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Keeble. Councillor Nicholas.
Thanks for waiting for me, everybody.
You've got to dig it ahead.
So, it is great that the state government has underwritten some support that we can offer to our communities, particularly those who have lost income from their businesses through these dreadful fire episodes that we've had. Much time and effort has gone into trying to work how to make it as equitable as possible, the way the money is allocated, with both councillors and staff looking into it in great detail, but particularly the staff who have gone through all the numbers and made sure that it'll work, and asked the government for the money, or how much we needed. So thank you for that, and I commend you for the work you've done.
How much do we get?
No, Councillor Keeble?
In
How much
the total
Victorian
of the-
Government Council's assistant fund did we get in dollars?
1.2 million. The total amount was $1.2 million.
So, how much of the rate relief will be...
Hang on a second, we'll just hear, we will take questions when we've finished debating the topic before we go to the vote. So, come, Tony.
I concur with Councillor Nichols. The question I have is in regards to the indirectly impacted businesses, the ones that have to will apply. I see that its applications will be on the 30th of April. How will we get the information out to everyone so that everyone has their time to apply if they need to?
So after today, we will place an application form on our website, and we will advertise that as well. The application form will have a number of essential criteria that will need to be provided for us to assess that. We will be assessing those applications as they come in. This is not a finite amount that we can be distributing, so we will assess those applications as they come in.
Any further comments from councillors? Councillor Forsyth.
This is per favour of the Victoria State Government, and it's coming back through councils, and we're only one of 6 councils that have got this money. However, there are people within the community that will still be affected that won't initially be covered by either the commercial industrial differential rate, they're not a dinner plane, and they're not either a winery or a vineyard. For those people, there is still, I believe, in Bright, a hub being set up for people who can access every other available assistance that there is, whether it be federal or state or mental health or whatever. But that is now set up and running, correct? The hub?
Bushfire Recovery Hub.
Yeah, that has been set up and it's running. Not running yet.
The Bushfire Recovery Hub is being set up in Bright. I believe it will be about 3 weeks away.
Oh, I thought it was last Friday.
Yeah, I think I gave out incorrect advice. Councillor Forsyth, I apologise for that, but yeah, it's been
anyway,
a while.
that is going to be available, and during that 3-week period, no doubt people who feel that they have been affected and they don't qualify for this, get yourselves ready and go along with the hub.
Councillor Nichols.
I understood there will be travelling portions of that hub as well, so it's not just the Bright focus, it'll be able to access services elsewhere.
Any further questions? I will take questions from the floor. Raise your hand, and Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, how much of the rebates are going to businesses that have registration in the local postcodes and the Shire postcodes, as opposed to registrations that are outside of the region?
So the definition is for businesses who are commercial and industrial rated within the Shire. So you must have property that is commercially industrial rated within the Shire to be eligible for rate relief within the Shire. For those businesses that wish to apply who do not have that, we believe they are also eligible. We will be requesting that, one, they operate out of the Shire, that the main income associated with that business is the person's principal income, that they provide us with an ABN and other financial information to show the significant financial impact that they have had.
Are there any further questions from the floor or clarification of what is we're discussing here this evening? Good, I'll take that as everyone understands fully. Anyone that's got a question about this after the meeting, please approach the officers. I suggest, Barbara, you have a conversation around the op-shot at some point at the end of the meeting. All those in favour? Carried. And I'd like to pass congratulations to councillors, even though it has been done, all councillors, to staff, and internally for all of the thought that has gone into this. It has soaked up a lot of thinking time about how to make it as fair and equitable as possible without wasting too much money on implementation. We are up to now 8.3.5, which is a planning application.
So this is, sorry Mr Mayor, thank you Mr Mayor. This is a planning application 5, 2019, 152-1. being the buildings and works, development of agricultural sea containers and a greenhouse associated with an aquaculture, aquaponics use. I might note as well, for councillors' benefit, that since this report was published, we have since received a further formal objection on this planning application and some further information as well that should be noted. For those objectors or for those the people who have provided information, please note that that information has been circulated to councillors for their consideration, although it's not contained within this report. The proposed development incorporates the construction of 2 sea containers with an awning attached to the northern sea container and 1 greenhouse to allow for the storage of aquaponics and associated equipment, testing and evaluating aquaponic systems, and to provide infrastructure to allow for expansion for another stage of development ready to be submitted for planning approval once the systems are established. The proposed use of land for aquaponics is exempt from requiring planning permit approval on the site in accordance with the farm zone. The proposal also includes a chicken enclosure and fence and vehicle access from Buffalo River Road. The application was advertised in accordance with 52 of the Planning and Environment Act. 1 combined objection signed by 2 parties was received, and several matters were raised in the objections which are further discussed in following sections of the report, noting the additional objection as I have stated previously. The report goes to the State Planning Policy Framework Assessment. A local planning policy framework assessment discusses the issues with the zone and the fact that this is a farming zone application, and addresses in detail those issues that were raised during the objection process. The application is considered consistent with the Alpine Planning Scheme, and the officer's recommendation is that the application should be approved for the following reasons. The proposed development of 2 sea containers and 1 greenhouse generally complies with the requirements of the farming zone, the land subject to inundation overlay, and clause 65. The proposal is consistent with the relevant state and local planning policies, and subject to conditions, the proposed development will facilitate an appropriate as-of-right agricultural use within the farming zone. It is recommended this application is approved.
Can I move in a seconder, please? Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Forsyth.
Okay. Majority of people in this room probably aren't privy to what is actually in this planning permit, which is in the pages following, unless you've got copies of it. The planning permit that is being recommended by the officer comes with, let me see, 29 conditions. Now, as an ordinary citizen, if I'm putting in a planning application for something and I got 29 conditions thrown at me, I'd think, well, I must be doing something wrong. Or, alternatively, people are listening to somebody else's objections or whatever. In this instance, it is a simple planning application, and I have to agree with the officer that as a planning application, it does cover off on all the requirements.
Councillor Nicholas.
There's nothing in the report that demonstrates that the application is outside the planning scheme. Quite correct. Councillor Forsyth. The thing that I find of interest in the whole proposal and the objections is mostly around the use of the word amenity, which comes in the planning scheme, and it is very subjective in most people's minds. It refers to sight, smell and noise, but it is something that can be taken into account and should be taken into account.
Any further questions? Councillor Keeble.
Thanks. Well, if we can go to the photo, maybe the photo area will show. Councillor Forsyth was mentioning about the difficulty of this, because if you haven't looked at the paper, so I want to, just so people can see, The red outline there is actually the land that we're talking about. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 residents in that 4, 2, right, on the other side of that. So that bit of land is considered farming zone. So I'll just let that, thinking what that actually means. So that's the complexity of making some of these decisions when there have been decisions in previous centuries where land has been divvied up and probably hasn't got the right planning zone on it.
Any further comment from the councillors? Councillor Napstone.
I went out to the site this morning and I've taken some images and I looked on the website. I smiled at the camera and I visited one of the neighbouring properties, so I was trying to put myself in both sets of shoes. I struggle with this one because when we had the briefing session with all parties at the table, or most parties at the table, it was such an adversarial situation to be in. I note that there are 29 very stringent conditions on that, and I have a question, how many extensions can be asked for on the planning or the execution of these?
So generally a planning permit has a sunset date on it. However, if someone requests an extension on the planning permit, we process that as an extension of time request. And as long as they can provide the relevant information and there hasn't been any major change in planning policy that would make the previous permit invalid in terms of it's, for example, if we had a major bushfire overlay change and there was a dwelling and it required different ratings, we wouldn't extend the permit. But as long as something like that hadn't happened, then we generally would extend the permits.
And I had a few further conversations in Norfolk, and the trouble is you cannot take hearsay into account in these and take council direction, and the officers have done due diligence. So I have to go with the recommendation and make the assumption that if any further developments were to proceed on the property, that would be subject to a new application.
So if there were to be a change of use of what is permitted by this permit or another development proposal, for example for a dwelling or any other development proposal that's outside of the scope of this planning permit, it is a requirement that another planning permit is entered into. You are only permitted to undertake the actions for which you're permitted under the permit.
Ed, get another one.
Final question on the
Yep.
Final question on the flooding and the implications of having those containers on the property. Is this where the elevation comes in?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the condition.
I think it's
one of the last ones.
Yeah, 21, I think it was.
There is a condition on the permit, sorry, I can't quite put my finger on my paper.
It's 800 millimetres above ground level.
That requires...
Condition 21.
There you go. That requires the permit, that requires the bill to be of a certain level, and that's to account for the land inundation of the lake.
One last question.
You said it before. Go ahead.
It is the last question. And who is going to monitor that all those conditions are being adhered to? Does that fall to council?
So compliance is a tricky space. So we issue a number of permits every year, and we undertake best endeavours to take compliance and adherence to those permit conditions. However, we rely heavily on others in the neighbourhood to alert us to when they believe the conditions have not been adhered to. So it's a combined approach. It's a combined approach of proactive council investigation, but also we do rely heavily on others to let us know if they believe the permit condition has not been adhered to for us to undertake compliance action.
Kitty?
So that just escalates the adversarial situation of it, but that's just an observation. Thank you.
Any further comment? Darren?
No, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Forsyth,
I'd say Councillor Keeble's note that perhaps it is incorrectly zoned. However, it is what it is. And I don't know what kind of other zone you would probably put in that, unless it was small, whether you made it into a residential block, which again is another issue. So at the moment it is farming, and that's what we're actually looking at.
With that, I think we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Carried. Assembly of Councillors. Number 9. Can I have a mover and a second, please? Councillor Keeble. Councillor Nicholas. All those in favour? Carried. General business from my right. Councillor Keeble.
I had something come back, please.
Yeah, you can reserve your right. Councillor left. Councillor left. Councillor Pearce wants to reserve his right as well too.
Same.
No.
Councillor Forsyth. You remember yours?
I'll go. I just want to say this weekend is going to be a busy weekend in our community. Long weekend, there's a lot on. For those people listening who aren't much like, make sure we're open, come in. It's going to be busy. It will be busy in Bright on Wednesday. If you are wanting to get into Bright on Wednesday, there is a big concert happening. So be wary of the potential road realignment closures, whatever you want to call it. Can I say that?
It's not a good way, is it?
It's not Michael Rubin. But anyway, I want to thank everyone in the Shire for this weekend because it will be busy.
With the events, we've got a cycle race, we've got Friday days, we've got Wednesday, the mystery person turning up. What else is that? Conquestathon. Councillor Pearce.
No, I have nothing.
Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Nicholas. Struan, your last council meeting.
It is, yeah.
And you're going to stall.
Are you?
Yeah.
We'll have to shave your neck curly beard off. Good luck to you. Good luck over there. 11 motions for which notice has previously been given. Do we have any? No petitions. Number 12. We have documents for sealing 13. Can I have a mover and a second to sign the documents, please? Councillor Keeble, Councillor Knapstein, all those in favour? Carried. There being no further business. Shut the meeting at 8:01. Thank you, Matthew, for having us. I know it's a long time between drinks. Oh, I thank the person on the Upper Keel Valley Community Association for antagonising from speaking here as a
Yep. I'll have one more if I can. Sorry, don't disappoint me. It is great to see everyone here. I can't remember the head count, but it's more than what we get in most other places, and maybe we can look at having 2 a year. Yeah. But thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk.